We have stories for you from and about the city of Galway, a city that has changed a good bit over the last 20 to 30 years, a city that absolutely dwarfs what it was 100 years ago. And there's a Galway-based retired engineer who has spent a good part of his life collecting postcards of the city of the tribes. His name is Paul Duffy, and Paul has published a selection of those postcards, some of them dating back to the 1890s, in a book which is called Galway City: Snapshots Through Time. It's a book that gives a very nice insight into what life was like here way back when and how life has changed in Galway over the past century.
First cards I picked up were in Athlone in the 1960s when I was in secondary school. And I slowly added to it when I came to college in Galway. And an elderly gentleman from Athlone one day gave me over 100 postcards of Galway city and county. And then bit by bit the collection grew by accident. I didn't seriously set out to collect the cards, and eventually when it grew to the size it is, I thought I should do something with them. So I produced a book of the county first, and then this book, Galway Snapshots in Time, on the city, and it's illustrated exclusively with postcards. There's no personal or private photographs used at all. They illustrate an awful lot of the changes in the street landscape, vanishing trams, changes in transport, changes in fashion. One of the strange things about many of the early cards is that they were never sent through the post. They provided a pictorial record for people who came to visit or came on holidays because they couldn't afford cameras in the early 1900s. I suppose as an engineer, one of my favourite shots would be the view of the front of the Eglinton Hotel with the black topping or surface dressing of the road in operation. But you notice the tar is all in barrels. There were no tar tankers at the time, and it's a very strange commercial postcard to produce. And the only explanation I have for it is that the company who supplied the tar, when they saw the photographer around, asked them to photograph the scene and used it as a business reply card.
That's Paddy Tool, skip river.
Paddy Kern, Paddy McDonough and Alfie Hennigan have taken a great interest in Paul Duffy's latest book, Galway City: Snapshots Through Time. This book features a wide selection of postcards from the 1890s to the 1960s.
Well, my own grandmother then, Sarah Curran, she had the St. John.
Oh, I know the St. John, that was a bigger boat.
Yes, starting Curran then.
That's back in Connemara as well, the St. John,
yes.
Someone from America owns that, no?
I don't know, yeah.
And who skippered it there at the back?
Big Paddy Tool.
And who was the other man with him?
That's Micah Doyle.
Micah Doyle used to do the drawings, is it?
The drawing, the pictures,
oh, yeah,
pictures, Micah.
Yeah.
There's the tree going up the cladders again.
I'm not surprised now that there's a lot of postcards that's from dating of the Spanish art. Like, it brings back family to myself, because it was here I was with my grandparents, Tom Gannon and his wife, Mary Malloy. You know, some memories, you know. Actual fact, as a child, and there isn't many in this town knows the circumference of that, how many stones is in it. I say to people, they laugh at me. There was 53 stones on that. I remember in the 40s, the blind art, my mother and her sister-in-law, Bridget Keneally, and they were smoking fish in there. The fish market then was just here to my left there now, and there was a big square thing it was called the concrete. Down at the lazy wall down at the end there, my grandmother had a fish head. Her daughter, May Smith, she's dead as well. She used to sell the fish with her, and we'd get maybe threepence to bring up the fish from the boats when that time she used to buy the different trawlers. Well, from the postcards now of the Claddagh in my time, where all the houses were all new, that built on extensions, it's not the Claddagh as such. In my time, it was all thatched cottages, from Lower Fairhill back the whole way, back to the coast guards, as we call them, the ex-servants' houses. My grandmother put the side of them. She had a shop there, Sarah Curran, all to the left and the right of that, of all thatched cottages. That time, it was a great place to live. Everyone knew something about each other, like there was community, you know.
Although the docks was and still is an integral part of many people's lives in Galway City, it doesn't feature in any of the old postcards.
Cards were produced really to give when I say a commercial view, what was a marketable view. Unless a postcard was specifically commissioned of an industrial scene, the view was unlikely to have been produced as a card. So you'll find places like Galway docks wouldn't appear on a postcard.
Well, the dock was a working place for people to give employment. Like there might be 100 dockers come down here and the men was caught from they were in groups on both sides, you understand. There was nothing there. There was no postcards around. There was nothing taken at the docks. I have fond memories of the docks because I was reared here. My grandparents had trawlers and they all belonged to them, my grandmother. But my father got employment here when they're doing the harbour. You know, there was an awful lot of things happened on the docks here, you know.
Each postcard in the book offers an interesting insight into how life was at various times in Galway City. The brown doorway, which stands tall at the top of Eyre Square, features in many postcards through the years.
Well, we're standing here in Eyre Square beside the brown doorway, and the important thing about all of that is that this would be a centre of attraction. So people coming in the train, especially at the time of the postcards, would be coming in way off behind you down there. So the first thing they see was Eyre Square. So I think it became synonymous with Galway that you were in Eyre Square. We can see now that a lot of changes have taken place from these photographs. For instance, the Dunkellen statue, which figured prominently in Paul's book, has disappeared. The brown doorway is still here, but the railings went about in 1964, and now it's an open square. It's completely different to what was in the photographs, but at the same time, a lot is still here. In regards, we'll say, the buildings. The original fairs were held in the Claddagh, Fair Hills in that area, but I presume that people were fed up trying to get through the town to get to there, so they decided to set up here. The biggest fair, of course, was for cattle. You had sheep and pigs as well. I think one of the most important things apart of Paul's book is what he has captured about Salt Hill, because Salt Hill has changed quite a lot, because it started off as two little fishing villages in the, if you like, the estate of the O'Haras. Paul's postcards, he shows Salt Hill 100 years back from us now, and it's so different. You had the trams going out, for instance, and it was tuppence a mile to go out. You know, the doctors at the time said, go to Salt Hill for two things, for the air and for the water. So you had the Kremen Bats, for instance, where Sea Pint Ballroom is, and the people could go in there, gargle the water and enjoy the water and so on. And then a strange thing came along, they built a prom. People could promenade all along. And of course, we had Alexander Moon of the famous Moon's Corner here not far from us. He built a diving tower in the late 1890s.
Declan Monaghan from Galway Focus Photography has spent over 10 years photographing people and events around Galway City. He finds it both rewarding and somewhat challenging, recapturing some of the old iconic postcards from this city.
You must have immense pride in this book that you've put together here, Paul. I mean, it's a fantastic record of Galway in the olden days.
People seem to like it, and I hope it will give them, particularly the native Galwegians, that it will give them pride in their city and what they have that is worth keeping.
Congratulations to Paul Duffy on his book, Galway City, Snapshots Through Time, which you'll be able to get in the bookshops. Now, just before we go, a reminder